Welcome to Read Poems Every Day. Today, we're going to wrap up my discussion, my process of slowly getting to know Ruth Awad's wonderful poem, Take Me With You to the Mountains. The last steps in my process of getting to know a poem are shaping ideas and questions, sketching possible contexts, and looking again. Looking again will be more speculative since it really isn't a step that can be completed until a week, a month, a year, 2 years later. So we'll probably be spending most of our time on these two steps right here. When shaping ideas and questions about a poem, I like to look back through my notes. This is something I also did in the previous step, form and figures, and hmm, think about the road thus far, right? Um, I think last time, actually, maybe I'll just go ahead to the form and figures section because I think that's where I was really the beginning of any ideas I might have about this poem or any ideas that the poem is helping to give me or helping me shape really started to take shape in the previous video where I was thinking about the role of the title, Take Me With You to the Mountains, a possible tension between this request and the speaker's uneasy or fraught portrayal of um, the lost mother, and then also the many sources of sadness in the poem that are again not. I mean, at odds makes it sound too dialectical. I don't mean it to sound dialectical. It's more like a kind of web, a web or assemblage of sources, some resources. But then I was also thinking a bit about the poem's apostrophe, its irony, hmm, and also by the end, I was asking questions about, or maybe thinking about, how to wrap my head around the line near the end of the poem. Where is it? Maybe three-quarters of the way through the poem. I think my father will mourn you until he's gone. When he talks about you, he does so like he's telling me about a person I've never met. And it hurts, if only because it feels true. And I think I had not fully understood what was true or what felt true to the speaker until near the end of yesterday's video. I think at first, what was I thinking at first? That the father's feeling of grief was relatable to the daughter, was relatable to the daughter. Um, but I hadn't quite articulated that what it might mean for that to be relatable is that the daughter, as I wrote near the end here, wonders and worries that the mother, the lost mother, is a person, in a sense she has never met, um, that she has never met. We see also here the kind of repetition of something feeling true and then supplanting that almost by association as the memory, um, a memory that seems always present of a hand on her spine. And so you get this sort of bodily sense of memory, the way certain kinds of experiences stay with a person, right? And that it's also by way of the conjuring power of lyric apostrophe that becomes incredibly vivid in the poem. All right, but what about ideas? What about ideas? The poem seems to map the, what should we call them, complex and competing experiences we tend to call grief. Stepping back, the poem encourages me to wonder, what is grief after all? That's a start. I mean, that's again shaping ideas and questions, directions that I would maybe want to take some of this in. In some sense, this step is the move from some of the particular questions I have about the poem to more general questions, that what we might think of as the stakes of the poem, why the poem might matter to readers. And I that can sometimes sound a little insulting, I imagine. Why can't the particularity of the poem matter just as particularity? Um, but I think in some ways what I'm getting at is and attempting to get to an answer of so what? So what that grief can express itself both as a request to be taken with um, to a kind of borderland or threshold of life and death, if that's maybe what the title of the poem is suggesting or requesting, but also an acknowledgement at the same time that people we lose, especially loved ones, are often the same people who have sometimes hurt us, who continue to hurt us, and not just because they're gone. That's a hard realization, maybe. And the way the one effect, maybe, of taking punctuation aside from apostrophes out of this poem is to amplify or to model at the level of mechanics the kind of slidiness and slipperiness, fusion, separation, layering that these different experiences of grief take on. Hmm. The absent punctuation encourage a reading experience where phrases, words echo each other without necessarily being part of the same meaning or sentence. So again, as an example, because it feels true, I feel your hand. These are two very different feelings, and yet the reference to sensation, it's as if that kind of clicks something or clicks a memory into view, and we're left wondering if that memory, that feeling of the hand on the spine, how does that and how do the next few lines illustrate that sense of feeling something to be true in a potential alienation between her father and mother. The worry she hears murmuring beneath her father's speech that he didn't really ever meet the woman he was um, in a relationship with, that he never really met the woman who he had children with. I mean, that's an odd paradox. One, of course, amplified by the sort of profound absence that is also at the heart of grief. Okay. Hmm. I was just a kid and didn't understand beauty. I still don't. I mean, these sentences here, hmm, there's kind of understated complaint to them, really, isn't there? One that really seems very different or in competition with the the longing for presence, or the kind of, one can imagine a kind of panicked response to death. Take me with you, right? Take me with you. Don't leave. Um, hmm. I'm now wondering too, what's going on here with modesty at the beginning of the poem. Why is that the place that we begin? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Why is modesty, questions of modesty, the place to begin the poem? It's also worth noting that that's the first question of the poem. So in this step, so I've been trying to shape some ideas, general ideas about the poem. Um, but in this step, I also kind of go back to and try to chart, sort of lowering lowering some of the pressure to have an idea or to give shape to an idea, lowering that pressure, lowering the stakes to simply just reminding myself of questions asked in the poem, because sometimes those are the questions that can also lead us to shaping our ideas. And it's interesting, the poem begins with a question: is it true the dead are so modest they require a shroud? Um, what other questions do we have? Is it true the dead? It's line one. Did you know? So that's line 15, I believe. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Um, did it hurt? That's 17. Did it hurt you? This is line 24. 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay, and I think that's it. Those are the poems. So we have a question about modesty as the potential reason for why you cover a body with a shroud. And then that's somehow connected with privacy as well. It's hard not to see those two ideas as somehow related to haunting, right? This is just a beautiful line. This idea that the lost one is everywhere. I mean, in some sense, the lost person doesn't leave me alone, right? Or just doesn't leave the speaker alone. So in what sense is privacy even at play? And also the slide from modesty to privacy is interesting because those aren't necessarily the same thing. Although one way to think about the shroud is that, it's something the dead is hiding behind so as not to be seen. Um, and so that shroud is also kind of like the threshold between life and death, somewhat like the mountains here too. Okay, and then questions about knowledge and pain as well. So wondering what the dead know, because that question here, did you know, is a question to the dead mother, um, not a question about when she was alive. And then the first, did it hurt? That's also about the procession. But the fourth question, that is about that is when she was alive. Did it hurt you that my father never came home? Oh, and there is another question I missed. Did you ever love him? So that's 25 to 26. Okay. So questions about the relationship between mother and father there. So the question of love emerges. I haven't really brought that up, although love and loss, of course, are almost always connected in, especially in elegies like this one, if elegy it is. Maybe I should go back up here to form. Just think note about elegy here. Um, Note about elegy there. I should say the collection edited by Lisa Faye Kootley that includes some poems by Awad. This is the collection I talked about, I think, in my first video about this poem. That collection includes those poems, but also includes a micro essay by Awad that reflects on grief, um, and her poetry and her poems that address, or take up grief as a problem and project. So that might bring me then to contexts here. Um, what readers would I want to look at? Um, Scholarship on contemporary elegy would perhaps be something to look at. Um, Awad's full collection, Outside the Joy, plus the micro essay in Kootley's um, edited collection would be something I'd want to look at. Of course, I always want to talk to friends about this poem, friends who love poetry anyway. So that would maybe be where I'd start, I think. Hmm. Poems regarding other poems, maybe regarding parental loss, might be something to take a look at. This parental loss wasn't something I necessarily thought about as a specific kind of grief, of course, until my father died. And then I realized there's this whole, of course, discourse out there about the particular kind of loss that can be. Okay. So those would maybe be the readers I'd think about. In terms of self or culture, I'm not sure. I mean, certainly there's tradition of funerals or processions. This is something I don't know anything about. And that would maybe just be for my own edification and knowledge, just so I have some sense maybe of what the speaker is um, imagining here, or what she's um, thinking about. Do think it's interesting that there's a kind of ironic distance between the speaker and the traditions that shape this poem. Um, I read We Call Our Afterlife Akira is very different from saying, as a young person, I learned this, from my parents or from religious leaders. It's a very different kind of way of introducing that. Um, End of afterlife, mountains, etc. So those would be something I'd want to think a bit about. Um, Akira, Jaina. So these words that are clearly Day of Judgment. I don't know anything about how that functions in Islamic tradition. I know, of course, the corollaries in the Christian tradition, but I'm limited there. Okay, there might be some scholarship also on daughter, mother, father relationships. Um, Psychoanalytic, of course, but also sociological, philosophical, feminist, right? That would maybe have to think a bit about as well. Hmm. Okay, in terms of concepts, sort of theoretical frames that come to mind here. To be honest, nothing really stands out to me that I would be interested in. I mean, I do think deconstruction and its idea of difference meaning the way words sort of slide out from under us, that their meanings by way of their repetition end up kind of self-differentiating. Um, that might be something to think about. That might be the ugliest effort to define difference in the history of literary studies, but that's where we're at. Derrida's notion of the traces might also be of some interest here. I, of course, psychoanalysis. Um, in thinking about Judith Butler and not just Freud, when it comes to thinking about loss and mourning, might also be something I'd go to. But and again, it doesn't immediately come to mind. I'm kind of stretching to think about where I would go. Um, but also the new criticism and its sense of irony as a principle of structure has been really important to how I've gotten to know this poem. So I think that would fill in here too. And what about the world? Hmm. I'm not sure what kind of biographical or historical context I would want to think about here. Maybe some investigation into thinking about how poets around the world responded to, captured life during and after, into the pandemic, right? I know after the pandemic is maybe a controversial preposition to put there, and so maybe offering some other ones there might be important. That seems pretty crucial to the poem's situation, what it's writing into, where it's writing from, the fact that it even names the pandemic here seems really important. But also, relations between the United States and the country where the mother lived. Um, and I'm just gonna guess, is it Lebanon? I can't remember. There are other poems by Awad that may clarify that, but I also don't want to assume that identification in other poems just maps onto this one. But that probably something I should know a little bit more about. Too, were I to write up a close reading of this poem more professionally than this video allows. Okay, I think post that only to me. And those are a lot of notes about a 40-line poem. What what do I think I might wonder about? What might appear to me if I looked back at this poem in another year? I mean, it's hard not to read elegies through the fog of one's own grief and one's own losses. So if I were to wait another year to read this poem, it'll be after the third anniversary of the death of a very close friend of mine, after the sixth anniversary of the death of my father. And so one wonders, how my experience of this poem will change as my experience of those losses also change over time. So we'll see. And maybe in the meantime, I will have learned a bit more about the contexts that I outlined below, and that will make certain things appear to me that maybe didn't this time. All right. I see the clock just hit 25 minutes. So that's, I think, it for Ruth Awad's, at least for now, with Ruth Awad's wonderful poem, Take Me With You to the Mountains. Thanks for being with me today to read it again, to spend more time with it. And let's read more poems tomorrow.